Soldiers' Heart by Alex 51324. Chapter 31. The Peter Letters. Part 6. 11th of November, 1918. Armistice Day. We have tried to keep our celebrations muted in deference to our hosts, but we are all thrilled to pieces, of course. We had a minute's silence and a prayer at the 11th minute of the 11th hour. One of the German nurses wept. Not, she assured us, because her country had lost, but because it was finally over, and her father and one of her brothers were still alive. We assured her in turn that we are happy not so much because we have won, although we are glad of that too, but because we will finally be going home. 18th of November, 1918. Word has leaked out that the Armistice Terms call for the immediate release of French and British prisoners. Our German NO has told us that repatriation will be handled by the Red Cross and that they will be starting at the front and working their way east. We are to be patient and continue doing what we're doing. Captain Kelly and the rest of our MOs, French and British, say that he's right and emphasizes that our patients continue to need us. The patients, however, are getting fractious, especially those who are nearly recovered and ambulatory. We, patients and staff, are now officially allowed to leave the hospital, although our hosts advise against it, as the sentiment of the local population is against us. A few have ventured out, though, and report nothing worse than being spat at once or twice, and being surrounded by hordes of ragged children begging for sweets or bread. 3rd of December, 1918. I write to you from Belgium! We have just crossed over the frontier and have been given shelter by a peasant couple. Most of us will have to sleep in the barn, the house not being large enough for us all, but at present we are all seated around the fireside while the peasant woman cooks us a lovely supper. We have agreed to combine our supplies and all dine together. Civilian supplies are as short here as they are in Germany, so our hosts are as glad of our tinned meat, etc., as we are of the chance to have some real home cooking, and vegetables that don't come out of a tin. Now that I have set the scene, I should tell you how I came to be here. As I said, the patients were fractious, and a group of them, taking advantage of the liberty to explore the hospital environs, spotted a captured French motor ambulance. After reporting this discovery to the rest of us back in the ward, they found out that it, or in any case one just like it, was captured along with two of our French comrades, one MO and one orderly. This MO is the one who has been in this hospital for the duration and has not been able to write to his family at all, so he is as utterly frantic to see them as I am to see you. Likewise, a number of our British officer patients are in no mood to wait around to be repatriated at the Germans' leisure. I suppose you see where this is going. Dearest, we recaptured the ambulance in a mixed party of British and French. The Germans, though not at all pleased, were forbidden by the armistice from using force to stop us, or believed they were in any case. It would only hold at most a dozen of us, and only that many if there were no stretcher cases among the passengers, so the MOs and the highest-ranking patients met in conference to discuss what to do. They decided that the party should include some medical personnel, since it was an ambulance and since some wounded would be going, and that it should be evenly divided between French and British. Each country selected 5 patients to go, based on state of health, length of captivity, ability to drive, knowledge of geography, and various other qualifications. The French medical personnel, by unanimous consent, agreed to send the MO whose ambulance it was, which left us to select an orderly. I was desperate to go, of course, but since several of the others had been in captivity longer, I didn't think much of my chances. Beyond that, if medical services were called for, they would probably rather have a man with 2 arms. However, as you will have guessed from the opening of this letter, the others chose me to go. There was less wrangling over this than I would have thought. Of course, everyone wanted to go, but no one wanted to argue that he deserved it more than the rest. So when someone pointed out that the rest of them had at least had news from home, while I had no idea whether my beloved brother was alive or dead, they all agreed that made sense, and was as good a reason as any that I should be the lucky one. The ones staying behind loaded us up with supplies and money, particularly money. Inflation in Germany has gone completely insane, and you can scarcely buy anything. And we pointed the nose of our ambulance to the west and started driving. The roads were absolutely choked with returning soldiers, freight of all kinds, civilian refugees hoping some other part of Germany might be better than the one they're in, and so on, but we were allowed to proceed more or less unmolested. We were stopped by German civilian police a few times, but we simply explained that we were Allied medical personnel repatriating wounded Allied prisoners under the terms of the Armistice, and they let us go. We managed to get our hands on a copy of the Armistice Terms, so when they demanded papers, we showed them that. It worked, I suppose, because none of them had any idea what sort of papers we ought to have had if we were an officially organized repatriation party and not an ad hoc one. Getting petrol was the biggest problem we had. You can't buy it. But since we had food to trade, we were always able to find someone with some they were willing to part with before we had altogether run out. The peasant woman is dishing up our supper, so I shall sign off. I hope desperately that we will soon share a cigarette together, but for now, light one for me. Your Peter. 4th of December, 1918. Forgive my penmanship as I write this from the back of the ambulance as we are driven by Lieutenant W. of the RAF. If you were here, you would say that now we have a good idea how he came to crash his plane. But I will say that learning to fly a plane must develop some habits which are not entirely conducive to operating a vehicle on the ground. After supper, when the Belgian couple asked us where we were going next, we realized that we had a decision to make now that we are officially out of German territory. While we are all agreed on France as a destination, some of us would like to head southwest toward Paris, others northwest toward the Channel ports. We have settled on sticking together for the moment and are going as near to due west as possible. We do not possess a compass, but both pilots claim an ability to navigate by the spars. We will reevaluate when we reach the other end of Belgium, or if we encounter British or French forces before then. It's very hard to write. The notebook keeps sliding off my knee, so I will close now. 6th of December, 1918. Encountered a British patrol this evening. They were led by a sergeant who immediately saluted, which stopped me in my tracks for a moment. We abandoned the practice in our ward back in 16, and so I have not seen anyone salute for years except for Germans. I'd nearly forgotten that our people do it. The men also reacted with great skepticism to my initial attempts to chum up and cage a smoke. We have only Swiss ones at the moment, so I wanted a dear old British flag. I had entirely forgotten that I'm dressed as an officer. Once I explained, they were quite friendly, although one ventured the opinion that I might want to find a soldier's tunic before any general staff saw me. It's very difficult to remember a world where anyone would care about a thing like that, but I suppose that world still exists, and I will be back in it soon enough. We exchanged a great deal of war news, and they assured us that conditions in England are not bad. Some shortages and so forth, but nothing like what we saw in Germany, and the aerial bombing not nearly as devastating as the Germans wanted us to think it was. They are quite impressed with us for having stolen our ambulance and made our escape. The French M.O. and I looked over a couple of minor wounds that they had picked up and changed their field dressings. 12th of December, 1918. Writing this from a CCS in France. Drinking a cup of stewed Dixie tea to boot takes me right back to the beginning of the war, it does. As the above suggests, we have crossed into France, yesterday in fact, and found our way to the British lines. Around the border, we picked up another group of self-repatriating prisoners of war, a group of British enlisted men. They were in much worse shape than any of us, having been in a forced labor camp, fairly near the front, and reliant on their captors for food as parcels weren't reaching them. Joining up with them has slowed our progress. We can only go at a walking pace since there isn't room enough in the ambulance for all, or even for all who really should be on their feet. The sick and injured have to take turns riding. The French M.O. and I conferred, and decided that the best thing was to get them into the hands of the RAMC as quickly as we could. By asking the locals, we found out the location of the nearest British hospital, though in correct RAMC parlance, it was nothing of the kind, being only a dressing station, and made our way there. At the dressing station, we were all given something to eat, and then the French, being pronounced fit for travel, took the ambulance and headed southwards. The rest of us were, in due course, evacuated back to this CCS. The other orderlies are all highly impressed with my capture. In the ambulance here, I was afforded the honor of riding up front with the driver. We are to go back on the next ambulance train to one of the base hospitals, where they are sure someone will know what to do with us. 15th of December, 1918. In Calais. No one here knows what to do with us apart from slaughtering the fatted calf. Several of the men who joined us at the French border have got dysentery from the change from starvation rations to being plied with delicacies wherever we go. Fortunately, I am not expected to help them, as there are plenty of two-handed orderlies here. It's nearly unbearable being this close to home and tied up in army red tape. We got ourselves out of Germany on our own, but now we're expected to sit and wait for someone to tell us what to do. It's maddening. The officers, I suppose, are being told more of what's happening, but they have been whisked away to an officer's ward. It got me flat-footed for a moment after having traveled all this way with them. We became quite democratic on the journey, and I had just as much of a say as anyone in what we did. It wouldn't be so bad waiting if I could get some news of you, but of course there's no way to do it. Everyone I ask says I'll have to get in touch with the War Office, but they've got quite a lot to do at the moment, and I can't expect a quick answer. One of the NCOs here, taking pity on me, reviewed the recent casualty lists, and told me you're not on them. There's no particular reason you would be, of course, but those were the only records he had on hand to check. Missing you like hell. Light a cigarette for me. 17th of December, 1918. You won't believe where I am now. On a train heading for Ripon. I heard about a ship headed for the Demob Center there. Coal miners, lightly wounded, and so on, and wangled my way aboard. Ripon, I was able to recall, is in Yorkshire, and thus near you, or at least near to the last place I know you've been. I have decided that the quickest way by far to find out what's become of you will be to go to Downton and ask. I must not expect to actually find you there. You've certainly joined up, or been called up, but they will know, if anyone does, where you are and how you're faring. They will also be able to break it to me gently if